Hello, friends. We know you've got a lot going on in your lives, running your businesses, taking care of your families, and yet the year end is here upon us. It's been a great year. We are super excited to have been able to do so many different episodes, but that's because of all of you. And now it's time for us to reflect on all that. Lorin, I know you and I have been talking about, wow, this year has flown by. I think a lot
We're
of
at
folks out there are
we're at our
doing
last episode for this
on
year.
our last episode for this year. We will be back in January, though. Um, as a business owner, so important to reflect on the successes, the misses, where can we improve, where should we improve, and where do we have to improve? How did you approach that? Because you were very successful, and sometimes being successful means maybe not setting yourself up for as much success the next year. So, how did you approach it? Because you were consistently successful.
Bite your tongue. Not as much success the next year. That's not a possibility for me. It was always better, better, better. Um, there's so much to look at, I mean, obviously everybody does their monthly reviews, but when you sit there and look at the year end and the year end for me, that review of that was always over the Christmas through New Year's holiday. Because you could take a breath and you could start to do a compilation of what events did I do? Were they worth it? What was positive about them? What was negative about them? I would create outlines of what month I did them in, take a look at, is there a better month to do it in? Would I have gotten, a different result? What kind of money was spent on whatever promos? I would also look at is my tech up to speed for what I want to do for, it may have been last year, may not have been, but am I going to need to improve that? Now people are considering whether or not they need to hire social media people to, handle those requirements and that exposure. There's a lot to look at. So when you look at your year in review, you're not just looking at the financial part of it. You're looking at, a month by month. And honestly, this is a lot like you could think about it because the wheels are always going. You're always thinking, thinking, thinking. But until you write it down and you actually put it together where you can take a look, you can walk away, you can come back a day later and look at it, and it's right there, and you're not having to keep it in order in the forefront in your mind while you're, trying to consume it. You go back and you, fresh eyes, you look at it and you're like, oh, something will jump out at you that maybe you didn't see when it was just in your head or while you were living it or while you were thinking about it. So I think that that's super beneficial, no matter who you are, to be able to write that down. I'm not somebody that would normally like to write things down because I would think it was a waste of time. So I've got it here. I can think about it. I lived it. I was in my store every day, so I didn't need to write it down. I learned one time when I wrote it down how I looked at it was completely different when I keep coming back to it. So I do recommend that. And look at, you want to look at your events that you did, break them down by month. You want to look at the timelines that were in place for that, any sales and promos you did, the vendors that supported you the most, the vendors that or the products that got you the most return business, the most excitement over them, trade shows and events that you're going to and that you're participating in, any organizations that you're supporting, whether that is through time and effort, or you're just, providing in-kind services for, or that you're supporting financially, whether it's a rescue or anything like that. Look at all of those things. I mean, a good example is we we uh, we donated oxygen masks to our fire department for all of their trucks for pets. That's not something you need to do every year, right? So that's something you can look at and say, okay, if I'm going to do one big thing every year, what is that going to be? Because that year it was that. This year it'll be something different. And then what are the little things around it? You want to look at what you expect your expenditures to be in the new year, because they're going to be for sure higher than they were last year. And what you're going to do to, if nothing else, remain consistent and what you could possibly do to grow. It's tough right now.
Yeah,
Consistent is a win if you
yeah,
can do
it
that.
really is. I think some of the other things too I'd throw out there is what did your customers tell you? Not
Oh,
only
absolutely.
verbally, but what did they tell you with those buying decisions? Because it is interesting when you sit down and look black and white numbers, they're telling you a lot.
Mhm.
And sometimes when I'm getting an anecdotal overview from someone, we go to the numbers and those views of things don't always match up. And I
Right.
see you're nodding your head. That is, you probably have experienced that with folks that come to you. It's like, but I just know, okay, you know, that is great, but your numbers aren't reflecting that. Why aren't they reflecting that? Let's make sure we hit that. Let's match those two, your belief, passion, and expectations with the outcome. And how do we do that? I love you talked about the organizations and the education and the giving. I think all of those things, one of the things that I seem to be having more discussions about is was that a trend that was hot for this year? Or is that something that is really going to be here for the next couple of years? And it's really interesting because I think in this day and age, I love that you talk about the folks that are looking at hiring social media folks. Obviously, I did a lot of that back in the day before it was popular. And folks really, they undervalued that obviously at that time. There is so much of it now that it is harder and harder to break through the noise. And so, social media, I'm having the conversation not just about trends, but what's the intention of your social media? Because I'll see folks who think they had really successful social media because they had something that, oh my gosh, 100,000 people watch this, social media post that we did and blah, blah. And I said, that's amazing. What did that generate for you? Did you get more customers? Did you get more sales? Did you get more people advocating for you, driving their friends that are there locally to you? We got a lot more subscribers. Okay. Was that the goal? If that was the goal, that's fine, right? It's about setting the expectation, identifying the ROI. And one thing about ROI is there are different levels and different needs.
Right.
Obviously, we all got to have revenue. That's the obvious one. But there are times when relevancy and eyeballs and folks sharing what you're doing can generate long-term revenue. So the relevancy has a value, an intrinsic value, because maybe you don't have to spend as much to get the word out in the future. Okay, I can accept that and understand that. Um, but it is social media is so funny. It's so fickle too, and it cuts both ways these days. And I think that's been the other trend I've seen this year, where people have
Right.
tried things and then found themselves inadvertently caught up in a no-win argument between different sides, and it's just like, yeah, that was a self-inflicted, don't want to do that again. So let's make sure we're really having a goal with that social media. But you're right. I'm getting asked, hey, do you know someone? Hey, do you still do that? And I was like, yeah, no. But here's what I would say, how you want to approach it based on what you're telling me. And I think that clarity that you were referencing of doing the review, understanding your business, what your goals are, what your return has been, and your costs, your time, your resources. Your costs are going up, your time and resources are going down. How do I maximize that within this notion of I'm going to be better next year? What are the steps to being better? And I do love that you do talk about all these things, and also with the internal vision, what worked for you and your staff this year? It may have
Right.
been the best year ever for you all, and you all were miserable this year. As you said, consistency sometimes is the best result. Um, I tell a lot of folks if I can achieve relevancy and revenue, whew, that's a golden matchup there, right? Same
Right.
thing. If I
Right.
can hit consistency and we're successful, we're hitting our revenue numbers, and I'm not draining the life out of everybody that's working for me and or myself. That's pretty important. That's got to be a part of your vision and your plan for success because that not only gets you, you know, consistency, but it gets you sustainability for the future, you know.
Well, I always like New Year's because you can look back, you can keep the things that were amazing, where you knew it just hit it out of the park, whatever that was.
Yep.
And as we're talking, I'm thinking about some of those things when I had my store. And then eliminating the ones that lukewarm, okay, could have been better. What could be better about them? Can't really define when you analyze them what would make them better. So maybe we just put that aside and create something new. I like New Year's because it's an opportunity for a new page, a new book to be written that you can add things in. Maybe you do nutrition seminars, maybe you have guest speakers, that come in. Maybe you have a guest trainer. There's so many opportunities to drive traffic into the store, create relevancy, to make people go, oh, haven't had that before. I mean, I
Yep.
remember, the first time we had a couple vets that came that, gave talks on CBD,
Yep.
for animals. And I couldn't seat enough people. I mean, it was mind-blowing how many people showed up for that. And we had closed the store. It was after hours, so that we could actually talk about it and not be interrupted. And the questions could be asked of the vets, and it was phenomenal. I honestly didn't project that. I didn't know that the response was going to be that. The clients who all came already were all using it for their animals. So, that was sort of like, well, we already know about it. And they're like, yeah, but now we get to ask vets
Yeah.
who make it and support it and use it and that kind of thing. And it was like, all right. And so, people were like, we'll stand. It's okay. And it was phenomenal. So sometimes you don't know. Would I repeat that? No, not the next year because I wouldn't expect again that type of return because it was so new. I'd wait until another 2, 3, 4 years went by to build up new clientele to be able to have that impact again. So you really have to analyze the things that you do, that you participate in, that you put out there and really look at them. And you do that while it's happening. But there is so much value when you are now looking at it at the end of a year where you're no longer part of it, having just lived it, have any type of um, emotional commitment. I don't mean it emotionally, but by emotional, I mean physical, financial, any type of involvement that's fresh. You're just coming off of it kind of thing. You can sit back and you can look at it, really with fresh eyes and really, critically and understand, was that good? Yeah, that was great. Or, maybe we don't do that again. We'll revisit that somewhere down the line. It needs work, and put it aside. So I love the wrap up, which is exhausting, but I really love the gear up for what's to come because that's exciting. That is yet to be. And I really encourage that for everybody. It's a game changer.
Yeah. And I love that you call out, the idea that January 1st is turning the page. It's that opportunity. Hey, we had hits, we had misses, we had things we wanted to address. Let's address those. Let's get out there early. in this upcoming year. Let's make those things happen. And it is interesting how the perceived change can impact the attitudes, the effort, and the
Hmm.
outcomes. And I love that. I agree with you. I think it's a great opportunity. I'm going to ask you this because we're reflecting ourselves here. We did a lot of episodes this year. This was something we started after the original discussions. And I said in our practical pet chat episode as we were doing our year end review, and I shared practical pet business was not something that was on our radar. Actually, came about from all of you. Many of you are listening to both podcasts, and you were the reason we did this one because you were asking us to cover more business things. And I want to say thank you. We would not have done that. And I have had some of my most favorite conversations here in these episodes. And so I really appreciate that you all have been a part of this. My year end review is I'm glad we listened when you spoke, when you sent the emails to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. It generated discussions between Lorin and I of, hey, here's an interesting topic. Wow, 3 or 4 of them have a, kind of a combination of these topics. And I love all that. Um, Lorin, for you, what was your standout for this year with Practical Pet Business?
Oh my gosh. There's been so many topics that we've covered that have been really important. Um, I like the conversation on the white labeling,
Mm,
the private labeling type of consideration. But for me, anything that we can share that somebody goes, oh, and can utilize, can help them, can deter them from something that they were, oh, maybe that's not such a good idea, or that excites them enough to go, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's try that. Some of the involvement that has come as a result has been amazing. And it's exciting. I really, it's interesting that this was the afterthought and this has been so great.
I agree. I agree. And I want to ask all of you again, share us with someone this week, or maybe, in the next few weeks. But also drop us a line. Let us know what you thought about this year, what you liked, what you would love to see us evolve into in 2026. We've got a lot of ideas, but we'd love to hear yours as well. Please send us an email to practicalpetchat@gmail.com or drop us a line in any of your favorite podcast networks, the vidcast networks that you listen or watch us on. And as always, you've got a lot, you're doing a lot, you're making a difference. And for that, Lorin and I thank you. And I want to say, have a great close to the year. Can't wait to see you and engage with you more in 2026.
Happy holidays, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.